Hey, everybody. Well, it's one of those good days for me, and that we're going to go live with my buddy Jess Pettitt. Jess Pettitt is one of the world's greatest speakers. She's an expert in DEI, but it turns out she's just one of those people that knows a little bit about everything. Good morning or
Hi,
good afternoon. Hey, Jess.
hi. Thanks for having me, and I am looking forward to a great conversation.
Well, let's temper our expectations. That's mediocre conversation, then we'll exceed. All right, so you and
How
I
about
were.
a mediocre conversation with a great friend?
Aw, who's joining us? I still got it. We were talking about what we're going to cover in today's podcast, and teaser: Rosa Parks is coming up. No, she's not a guest, but she's coming up. We're going to talk about her. But I wanted to surprise you, Jess, and tell you what's going on with my kids' college.
I can't wait.
My youngest goes to George Washington University, and their mascot. I hope I have this right. I think it's the colonists or colonials, maybe something about that. Very similar.
Mhm.
And here's a surprise: they're going to change that mascot. And so all the students are talking about what they should be. And fun fact to no one tell: a lot of the students want it to be the hippo because it's like an unofficial mascot, and they all love the hippo. But the sports teams do not want to be the hippo.
Right.
And the people who are going to sell the athletic gear, to the parents and the fans, don't want it to be a hippo because, like, the fighting hippos. Anyway, so the colonists, and then bringing it back to you and me, I said, well, 13 original colonists, or what? And then I kind of, I'm embarrassed to admit it. I said, what's the problem with that, really? And she said, well, that's the problem. Like, we came from England to conquer the new world, and we kind of took it. We colonized it.
Right.
What springs to mind when I tell you, one, we have yet another mascot change, and two, your buddy Brad, who thinks of himself as very hip, had to ask my kid for help.
Well, I would say welcome to being relatively normal, in that it takes context clues to always be able to determine what's happening, right? And I think we also are very much underrating how dangerously lethal a hippo is.
Exactly.
We live in a culture where like fat phobia can't have that happening. So similar to I used to work at New York University, and their mascot is a violet, the flower. And I don't know if you know very much about flowers, but a violet can't even get wet. Like, not the strongest of mascots. So they call it the bobcats. Listen to this. So bobcats, like the furry cat, is what dresses up, and NYU barely has any sports anyway. But it's called the bobcat because that's the name of the Bopst Library card catalog system. The bobcat.
That is so lame. But also, whoever picked Violet,
Right.
the big game of the season is the against their rivals, the dandelions.
Mm. Which are killer for allergies.
I understand they're good in salads. Never tried it. Don't know.
It's my favorite flower, actually. I was just trying to make a violent joke.
So, what's your take on mascots? Like, does it really matter?
I think representation matters. I really do. I also think that sports are dumb. So,
And we just lost half our audience right there.
I know, and goodbye. So I think representation really matters in the sense, if you think what becomes a mascot, is this strength and virility or like wildness, that is somehow what is generally wielded as a strong athletic mascot. But there's a very thin veneer between wildness and like civilized, and civilized is a direct, now we're back to George Washington, of civilized is a direct link to colonization.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you live in a kennel, by the way. Just saying.
I know. I'm sorry. I did turn her 80s vinyl music on for the afternoon, but Here we are.
So just before we started recording, just said, hold on, I need to turn the radio on for my dog. And then I asked her what station, thinking she would say it doesn't matter. And she actually, your dog has preferences in music styles.
Yeah, so this weekend was a lot of Irish folk music for obvious reasons. In the morning time, we have like slow sunrise meditation songs. I think if you believe in reincarnation, you want to come back as one of our dogs.
Okay, good enough. Uh,
What about
back
you?
to,
What are your thoughts on mascots and sports in general and the whole?
I think it's complicated and I think it's easy to overjudge. And here's my example. I did a job as a motivational speaker, #BrianMontgomery.com, and went to a Poplar, Montana that has a very large Indian reservation. And I'm talking to this white guy who hired me to speak to the school district. And we're in the gym, and it said their mascot was the moccasins, I think, and they had Indian images everywhere and the word Indian everywhere. And I said, I thought we were not supposed to use Indian, that word. Isn't this like, all my alarms went off like, oh my gosh, I think it's wrong. And he said, no, the reservation talked about this and they love this mascot and they like the Washington Redskins, for example. And so it kind of depends. So before you're so quick, Brad Montgomery, to say, well, I read that Indian is a bad word, these people self-identify as Indians and they say, shut up. So
Right.
that's my way of saying, I don't know. Colonists, probably not so much. Probably not a great idea. But a lot of the mascots, maybe it's not as simple as we think.
Right. A lot of things aren't as simple as we think. And I think it's actually very common, the schools or the institutions that have native mascots, that they do it in collaboration with local existing tribes. And that's a really beautiful thing that involves the university embedded in like a community that is a connection to the land and to history and acknowledging those things. I think that's beautiful. And most of the schools that I know about also every year or so get somebody who like attacks them for having that mascot. And then they have like a set press kit of like, yes,
Oh,
and this is what we did. And thank you very much for reminding us, because somebody has this brand new idea that they're going to yell at somebody. Right. So,
well,
but
I
there
thought it
are
was.
schools that haven't negotiated those things. So you can't know.
I thought it was interesting that I'm a white guy that's not from Montana, and has never met anyone on this reservation at that time. And I'm talking to another white guy about all this Indian imagery, saying Indian is a bad word, right? And the whole thing was just ironic and weird.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking I had a really nice. It was a beautiful thought, Jess, and it just left my head. Like so many, all the brilliant thoughts have left my head.
Want me to bring up something random? Is that
Yes,
exciting?
please. I love that.
So while I was out of town this week, my husband watched Gangs of New York, which is a movie. I think it's Martin Scorsese, Leonardo DiCaprio's in it. I have not seen said movie, but he learned in that movie that a lot of Irish immigrants, when they immigrated to the United States, were immediately drafted for the Civil War. So they got off a boat and then immediately on a different boat, and then transported to like North Carolina to be fighting for the Union because the Union needed soldiers. So we are having this conversation, and I think history is really amazing and how it overlays, and we don't think about things happening at the same time. So these Irish immigrants are going to North Carolina, which is when women and children were moving into the tenements, like the really like awful squalor apartments in the Lower East Side,
Mm-hmm.
because their person, like their husbands or
Right.
brothers or fathers, just got drafted to fight in the Civil War. I had never put those two things together.
I didn't know they were drafting anybody in the Civil War.
Yeah, it's not a lot of volunteers, it seems, to go into war.
Yeah, imagine that. Can't imagine
I know.
why.
Fuck.
Although,
But
unless
then
if you're in Ukraine, I think I'd be volunteering, right? Because you'd be so angry. Like that would feel personal. If you're
Hmm.
coming off the boat from Ireland, they'd be going, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Right.
This is not my war.
Right. Right.
But someone takes
Um,
your kid or your grandkid, I think you volunteer.
right. I'm
Wow, we got
picking and choosing which things to land on.
well. Well, maybe we ought to transition a little bit.
Right.
Uh, Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks.
I told you the story in a. I read this somewhere. Please don't ask me where I read it because I can't remember. I think it was the New York Times, but it was talking about school books. So there's a competition for every school book to be hired or purchased by districts and massive amounts of money. And in order to please a school district, I think in Florida, they changed the Rosa Parks story, and it showed the three different versions. And the first version was something similar to, well, a white person asked this black woman named Rosa Parks to move because that was the law at the time, and she said no, and hijinks ensued. I didn't mean to trivialize it, but you know what I mean. And then the second watered down version was less like they left out the racial component. And they said they asked her to move from a white section or something, and so you had to read between the lines. And the one they landed on was Rosa Parks was very brave because a person asked her to leave her seat on the bus and she didn't. And that's what they stuck with. So, what do you think this means about our where we are in American culture?
Well, when you can have alternative facts, that it's not wrong, it's just omitting a lot of details.
Right.
And the story that most of us know is not actually totally factual either because we've kind of romanticized the idea. I think that is often how we think about history or struggles, right? Is that people don't think that Rosa Parks continued doing activism her entire life, left the South, moved to Detroit, and continued to show up to marches and doing activist things. And some people would recognize her and move her to the front of the lines. And most people were like, who's this slow lady? And would like move her to the back of the line. And then people would be like, yo, that's Rosa Parks. And they move her to the front of the line. But we don't always recognize truth. We don't always recognize people who came before us.
Right.
The story of Rosa Parks, I think, is a great example. There's a part of me that's excited she made the book.
Right, because it could have been washed out totally.
Right. There's a great book for anyone interested I recommend that's called The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks. And it's all archival research done through her papers that are currently at Wayne State University. And it is a fantastic read.
In case I wasn't intimidated before that moment, that was it. Like, what have you not read? So while I'm watching like some crappy Netflix show, that you're off bettering yourself at the planet.
I don't better the planet very well, if that's helpful.
Well,
I don't.
back,
I also don't. I don't watch a lot of television.
back to Rosa. If you broaden the topic very, very wide,
Mm-hmm.
and you say, well, we don't want kids to feel bad about themselves. If you go wide enough, I can buy into that. But when it comes down to a little closer in and somehow get me to agree to this sentence, if we tell kids that Rosa Parks was treated bad because she was white or black by a white guy and the laws of the time, and wasn't that messed up, why that is a bad thing to learn to any child and why that somehow affects their self-esteem or whatever is so weird to me.
It is weird, and I would say, if I can, you demonstrated part of the weirdness, at least in my view, right? Is that when we say talking about kids, we picture kids like us. We picture white kids, and so we have to teach white kids about this, and that might hurt their feelings. But what about the not white kids that would actually find this a very empowering story?
Well, A plus on you for calling me out. Yeah, I didn't think of that. Dang it.
Well,
Ah!
it's in our friendship contract. The
Yeah,
same
right.
thing happens.
I was coming out at that thing from a white guy's perspective.
Right. And you're coming at it from your own children. So again, this isn't a guilty shame thing. It's just to notice whose kids are we talking about here. So one of the things that I like to try to encourage people to ask is, if it is an act of protection, is it protecting the weakest person? Or is it protecting a stronger person than the weaker person? Because then
Hmm.
why not protect a weaker person? I totally support protecting people. That sounds great. So same thing with oh, now I'm going on a monologue, but gay stuff in classrooms. Like, well, we can't be talking about children about gay stuff. What about their teachers or their parents or their grandparents or their neighbors who are gay? You're now saying that that can't exist in school. But those aren't the people we're protecting. We're protecting people who don't want their kids to know about gay stuff, which means likely their parents are not gay.
Good point. But also, like, almost, I mean, my leap is twofold. One, I'm on board with this, yes. And have they not heard of the internet? These people who are saying, let's not put this book in the library, and then everyone knows what that book is, so they're going to Google it. Let's not
Right.
put gay stuff in the library. Well, if you want to learn about gay stuff, I'm pretty sure, unless your kid's an idiot, they're going to find out.
Right. And if their kid is an idiot, they probably should be learning things.
Oh, good point. Right. Well, it reminds me of years ago. I remember we were talking about me and another group of parents. We were talking about trying to hide the internet from your children with filters or whatever to keep them away from gay stuff or porn or whatever. And one guy said, I'd be pretty much ashamed if my kids could not get around any filter I could install. Any piece of technology that I can put in there. They're just not worthy if they can't get around that.
Right. I think that's a really funny point. Yeah, I'm not a very tech savvy person either, but I also am not brave enough to have children. So,
Well, it was kind of fun.
yeah,
uh,
I've designed my entire life to make sure that that does not happen.
so my wife says that these culture wars, and I mean, she always uses the word fear, and she just says they're just afraid. So you're in a group that maybe needs protecting sometimes.
Sure.
LGBTQ plus IA, or did I say that right? I think I did.
Mhm.
How does that make you feel? Do you feel like the world's afraid of you?
Um, I think fear is real, and I mean, I talk a lot about curiosity, which I think is kind of the antidote to fear. Uh, as a woman, like having people decide what kind of healthcare I can have access to, but I don't have any input in that conversation feels very strange. As a queer person who's married, it's very weird to think that my marriage may be null and void at some point in time because of some decision at a table I don't have access to, which would then mean I wouldn't have like health insurance, but also like, what is my 20-year relationship then? Um, I'm married to a trans man. And so the fact that his existence is being questioned, like he's pretty real and forgot to take the garbage out again. Pretty real. But if his existence is in question, I often feel like that is more of a worry than whether or not I have access to healthcare. So now I'm like rating fear levels, which feels very strange. Um, I live in California. So in a lot of ways, I feel very naively protected, but it is fearful. And I try to stay in curiosity. But I also have enough resources that my Maslow hierarchy of needs is pretty covered.
Yeah, that to me that question was answered so interestingly because I thought I was asking you about um like the right Christian right's fear of you as a queer
Mhm.
person married to a trans man.
Oh, and I
But
answered for my
I
fears.
what
Yeah.
I loved is that you're like I got some genuine fears in life related to all these topics, like
Mhm.
losing healthcare, like Wondering if my 20 years you've been married?
18, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations. Yeah, wondering if those 18 years somehow do not apply, and that's gonna.
Mhm.
But that also maybe is a tip to, like, maybe I was just being another white guy, like
No, I don't.
missing the complexity of it.
Well, I mean, I think both can be true, and perhaps I misunderstood how you were asking me with my identities. The question. I think I have also experienced so much um, loss or distancing from people who say that they are people of faith. And I have so many people of faith who also identify as queer in my life that that they can be as afraid of me as they want. That's their interpretation of their faith. And I hope that they fear many things bigger than me. It's not my place to judge them. Evidently, that's what their God's job is supposed to do. Um, so, good luck rectifying that. I don't even know what happens when I die. So I can't be fearful of their fear.
Right. Well, what strikes me is if they knew you and they had dinner with you and Lauren, your husband, they'd probably go like, "What delightful people." But somehow, if you're just oh, there's people who are married in a world that I don't understand. They have an agenda to ruin America.
Right.
That those two things don't match. If
Yeah.
they knew
Well,
you, they'd say, "Jess is nice. She doesn't seem to be trying to corrupt my children."
and I mean, oddly, that kind of goes back to Rosa Parks in a lot of ways. In that if people knew Rosa Parks as an individual, then it's a lot easier to kind of say, like, she just decided not to get up. But if you know all of the dynamics that were actually happening as to why she was even asked to get up in the first place and why she decided refused to get up, why that was organized in advance, that's a much bigger conversation, right? And so, and a lot of activist movements strive to personalize the issue. So, to come out or to like really be able to acknowledge to people in your life, like, I'm one of those things, like to personalize the issue is a very powerful piece. But if you personalize it, you can also be the exception. So you have to personalize it in context. And now we're back to mascots.
What? How are we back to mascots when you said personalizing context? Your brain just
Personalize,
did a
like,
leap. What? What did you
yeah.
just say?
So I because of mascots themselves, I think that it is understanding why a particular organization would pick this thing. Like, let's say the school that you're referencing in Montana, because it's on a reservation or because it's in collaboration with the community, there's a larger context. And some stranger on the outside sees something and they're like, ah, what's going on? But they don't necessarily know the personalized examples, nor do they know the context work that's been happening. It's complicated.
It is complicated. Focusing on
It,
people in front of you helps.
yeah, it's worthy of discussion, even though it's complicated.
Oh, yeah, I get it. But also, some people I think are just exhausted. Like, I can't follow it all. I can't read every article Jess Pettitt referred to. I didn't read the Rosa Parks book, so I'm out. But really, I don't think we have to. I'm like, you don't have to approach this as an academic. You can approach this as, what kind of person do I want to be?
Right. Which to me is where you can just be curious. Like, to fundamentally be curious means that you are aware you do not know something, and that is like a thumbs up activity.
I was in an Uber car 2 days ago. Stick with me. I promise it's related. And it was late at night, and it was a really good Uber driver, and that he was kind of following me. Like, does this guy want to chat or not chat? What does he want to talk about? And I told him, oh, yeah, I like chatting. And in fact, some of my best conversations are with Uber drivers because we enjoy this very short, finite relationship. I can tell him all my secrets. He doesn't know me or my people. He can tell me all his secrets. and we're like, we can be very, very close. And then I get out of the car and we're gone again. And so we were both reveling in that joy. And then he's telling me the story about this guy who was glum, and eventually the Uber driver coaxed out at him, like, seems like you're down. And the guy said, yeah, my girlfriend just attempted suicide, and he was super down. And the Uber driver ended up saying, well, I get it, but it sounds like you saved a life tonight. That was a good day.
That's an
And then
amazing read.
the passenger was quiet. And then near the end of the ride said, you said just the right thing. So the Uber driver is recounting this thing to me. And it was, the point was two humans connecting, right? With no, we're not talking about politics or anything. Just being in the same car together, listening to each other, caring about each other. And I had so much hope after that, because I connected with the Uber driver. He told me a story about he really helped somebody. And it makes me think about politics and, the gay agenda or whatever of mascots. If you just talk to a person, they're always lovely, or nearly every person, right? Most people are lovely.
I think you put it best when you talk about this kind of container space of like a limited Uber ride. There's these liminal spaces that have an end with very little witnesses,
Yeah.
and you just get to be a human and actually connect with another human on an unknown human level. You don't even know what's going to happen or where it's going to go. It's really beautiful. It's just beautiful, you know? Um,
It's
yeah,
being vulnerable is less terrifying if you know you're going to get out of the car and never see him again.
right. There's because you're not being held accountable for anything that happened other than like the video cameras and an app rating.
And if they're mean to you, whatever, you get out of the car in the amount of time.
Yeah. I always think like because you and I both fly so much, has someone ever been like a real jerk at TSA or at the coffee shop, and then you get to the gate and they're still there, and you get on the plane and by then you have forgotten that they were a jerk, right? Or
No, I
um,
feel the opposite. I'm like, I don't like that person. They were just mean to four people and kicked a puppy.
do you still feel that way if you're getting off the plane? Have you forgotten by then?
I don't know. I'm pretty judgy. I I don't know. I can't think of an example of that, but I definitely have noticed. Wow, that person was just horrible to the gate agent, and I run row behind them, and then I'm thinking, I don't love that person.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm not like this good human.
No, I don't think there's a value judgment there. I am definitely cautious. And because I'm usually one of the people to get on the plane early, that sounded like a humble brag, but they're upgrades, people, they're upgrades. But I will tell the flight attendant, like, there's a guy coming up who's like hot, just be prepared. He's in a red shirt, right? I will
Oh,
totally do that.
fascinating.
Yeah.
What does the
Um,
flight attendant usually? How do they respond to that type of warning?
uh what is the deal, and I'll be like, they're drunk or they've had a really bad day or they were really rude to the gate agent or whatever, and then they know what's happening. And usually it's like, three or four people behind me or something, so I like to warn them that something is coming.
Aw.
But it works the other way around too, is that I just the flight home, I was sitting in a window in the first class, and the woman and her boyfriend, I guess, were coming, and their hands were full of everything. So I always make a joke like, "Do you need a coffee table?" Because I can like hold the muffin and the coffee while they're putting all their stuff everywhere. And she was going to be sitting in first class, and he was going to be sitting at the bulkhead. And I was like, "Well, why don't we just switch so you both can sit together?" And they were like, "But this is first class." And I was like, "I sleep just as well back there as I do right here. It's going to be fine." So then we did that, but then the flight attendants come around, and like, this man is obviously not Jess Pettitt, the million miler on United, right? So she's like, "What is happening? What's going on?" And they kept trying to give me like their snacks, and then the flight attendant was like, "I should do something because you were being so nice." And like, I'm gonna stop talking to me so I can go to sleep. Like, I'm just gonna sleep up there. I'm gonna sleep right here. It doesn't matter. We're good. Um, it goes both ways because there's I think there's a humanness there that is like, I saw a problem, I could solve it.
Yeah.
And I saw a problem, I held a grudge, so I gave a little warning.
Right.
But I find by the end of the flight, I have usually forgotten all of those things. But it's also because I've been asleep.
All right. So, what? I think the planet just stopped spinning. Meaning, when I do something selfless like that, and I have, although it's hard for me to give up for first class, even for a good reason. But like, for
It was a
example,
30-minute flight.
it was it was a what flight?
30-minute flight. You would do
Oh,
it for 30 minutes.
okay. I would probably do it for 30 minutes. But
Yeah.
I remember one time I was sitting next to a really tall guy, and I had an aisle seat, and I gave it to him because I mean I'm short, and the middle seat is less horrible for me than it is for him. But
See, you
but
have a soul.
I do, but also there's a piece of me that just wants to be Gandhi and give to the world and be open to love or whatever. And there's another, maybe bigger piece that just wants someone to pat me on the back and put a star on my forehead and say, "You're awesome, Brad. Well done." So having you say like, quit thanking me, I might be basking a little bit in that. Well, it's nothing. I'm awesome.
I don't want to turn it into too much archival stuff or you get mad at me for reading more books, but Gandhi was really a hot mess. If you want to feel better about yourself, read Gandhi's autobiography because, wow, you're doing just fine.
The name of this podcast should be called "Crap Brad Doesn't Know But Should," and got called out by Jess. See, so far, I don't know that much about Rosa Parks or Gandhi. I'm afraid to mention any historical figure or fact
So
generally.
if it's helpful, okay, because you're making me all embarrassed now. So first off, I do read a lot. But I don't only read. Like I really actually sleep far more than I read. But I did my master's thesis on these four people. So you've just like magically picked well.
Oh,
So it's Gandhi, Rosa Parks, Mother Teresa, and Martin Luther King. Like if you don't pick the four of them, I'm probably back to like I don't remember.
taking a note: avoid Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King.
You just picked well. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We're talking about when we personalize our relationships and actually talk to a human, the bigger issues of politics or whatever that we've imagined. Oh, I'm a red person or a blue person. They're the opposite, so I don't like them. Not so true if you're just sharing a piece of pie.
Right.
Right.
Or an Uber ride.
Or what?
An Uber ride.
Or an Uber ride. But it reminds me, two of my best buddies, a lesbian couple. We've been friends for decades, and they were. One of them was in a choir concert. This was like 25 years ago, and it was like I don't know. It was some LGBT choir. I don't know what it was, but they had the funniest song, and one of the lyrics was like, once everybody knows a really boring gay person, things will be better for gay people.
It's true, probably.
And so I'm recounting this to my buddies who are like, they're whatever. If you try to picture what like a larger than life gay person or lesbian person might be like, this is not my buddies. That is not them. And they just thought that was hilarious. And I thought that was, and they're like, yeah, you should just send all your friends to have dinner with me. And then they'll say, nothing to see, people.
Very
Nothing to
boring
talk
life.
about.
Mhm. It's are you familiar? This is a pop culture reference, not a book. But I know you've seen it, so I'm ending on a good note. But Hannah Gadsby's Nanette.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So first off,
Stand-up comedy special for anyone else who
yes,
hasn't heard.
see, not nerd stuff. So at the very beginning, she talks about how obnoxious and loud pride is, and that could be a whole nother topic. How ridiculous pride has become. And she's like, my version of pride is the sound of a teacup nestling in its spot in a saucer. That's what that reminds me of. Quiet
Well,
and boring.
that's funny because my buddy said the same thing. Like, I'm never going to a pride parade. I don't have anything in common with them. Brad, are you going to go to a straight parade? Right. You have nothing in common with them.
Uh-huh.
There's nothing there. That made a mark.
I'm trying to think of all the different examples that would be like a straight parade. Is that like Thanksgiving Day, the Macy's parade, Rose Bowl, those kind of parades? So are those straight parades?
No, those are androgynous breeds. I don't know. They're there's nothing there.
4 a.m. at Target on Black Tuesday. Is that a straight people parade?
Can you say Black Tuesday? I don't know. You might be racist.
It's an accounting joke. It's not a racial joke.
Okay.
Because
All
it's
right.
when all the retailers go into black.
I think actually that I made a little joke saying you can't say Black Tuesday without being racist. I think that fear I pretended to have is amplified all across America. That
100%.
that were like, oh my, you can't say anything.
Yeah, 100%. And my counter would be you're paying attention enough to realize that you don't know if you are or aren't saying the right thing at the right time. And other people have like, they're just trying to stay alive. Like, so that like the counter is like, ugh, it's just so confusing. LGBTQIA, what other letters are they going to add? Oh, I don't know. Right. Like gay and lesbian people can say that too.
Right.
And other people are trying to stay alive. It's just a different scale of actual fear. Brad, this is
Yeah.
why I have no friends.
What do you what? What do you mean? This is why you have no friends?
So I feel like we're just having a casual conversation up your head. It's like
Well, no, I'm.
you're so much more competent in these areas than you give yourself credit for. You're just not. There's no way to like 100% nail it, and knowing that is agita inducing.
Yeah, that's true. And to be fair, in some ways, that's my gift, in that I'm very self-deprecating and aw shucks. And also, it's a crime because sometimes I'm aw shucks when I really should not be saying aw shucks because I get it, and I'm totally aware that among dudes who are in their 57th year, who grew up in a white school and city and suburb, I'm pretty freaking hip. But it still astounds me that because I kind of feel like I'm so hip, I shouldn't be. I still find, when I'm tripped up and I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. I'm a little like I'm surprised. Like, dang it, why don't I know this yet?
Yeah. Well, you like the metaphor I like to use because I need this too. I make mistakes as well. I've downloaded the app and I pretty much expect the app to do all of its upgrades at night so that I am always on top of things. And it's not an app. That's not how it works.
Right. So I
And
swear this is.
it's an ever changing target too, that um so in my own personal life, if this is helpful, like I compare it to when I had a job, I was the techie person in the office because I could intuitively figure out like tower servers and fax machines and copy machines. But my techiness stopped there, like basically when the internet came about.
Time to update that app.
Yeah, but I mean, I could still identify as a techie person, but I'm a techie person in very outdated equipment.
There's different degrees of being hip or woke or knowledgeable or sympathetic or empathetic or compassionate. I was reminded of that this past Sunday. I was at a church where I was playing drums in a band. That was fun, and it was a great preacher. But he told this story from the Bible, and he was gonna sermonize on this, right? And I don't know what the story was, but it referred to a black or a blind person, and somehow it wasn't a compliment. And so the preacher spent, I swear to God, 12 minutes talking about saying, hey, this Bible this is not cool. This Bible was talking about a disability, and in a way that was saying this person is less than and somehow not as religious or not with God or some. To be honest, since I don't know the biblical context, I don't know what the point was, but I was so fascinated that he spent 12 minutes kind of as a preface, like here, before I even start my sermon, I need to go on and on about how this is uncool. And I was so fascinated because one, it was interesting. Like, oh, right. I didn't, wow. Yeah. But also I just wanted to go, are you kidding me? Couldn't you just put that as like say, by the way, this is super uncool. Now I'm going to start my sermon. Or do you even have to, do you have to say it every time? I don't know where I fall on that.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I think that the crux is about every time, is that in some spaces, oh yeah, I'm using this interpretation. It's got some weird outdated language in it. Moving along, blah blah blah. And then other times that you can take advantage of having like an educational moment. And I imagine if they're sermonizing, to use your word, then you don't want to assume everybody in there knows that the scripture that they're reading is a language translation that is also outdated.
Yeah.
So then you kind of have to like caveat there's some language in here. And I mean, I think we have to do that all the time. People get hung up on the details.
But do we have to do it all the time? We started. Maybe we should finish here. We're going back to GW because that's where my youngest kid is, George Washington University. She said every time there's a public event, even sort of public, they fall all over themselves saying, we acknowledge that we are on native lands, that we took unfairly, that there was tragedy and injustice, and they've got a long thing. And she said, like, yeah, we get it. We heard that last time, and the time before that, and the time before that. And sometimes it's wearing off a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Right, because it can be overexposure, and somebody in that room is hearing it for the first time. Yeah, I don't know that there is an answer. And again, a good kind of measure is, are you protecting the most harmed people?
Yeah.
And in that case, you could say that every single time. And people will say, like, this is a waste of time. We have a really tight agenda. Like,
right,
okay. Right. You can also just acknowledge it briefly. And there are times where it's not appropriate. Or it doesn't feel appropriate, or it would be disingenuous. Maybe it would be appropriate, but the person doing it can't do it in a way that feels sincere. So then don't do it.
Yeah, this is why I love you, because you're so consistent. Really, like, if you look at it that way, like, that disclaimer about stealing native lands is not for my white blonde kid.
Right.
That's not who it's for. Although she ought to hear it, but now that she has it, it's for are there people who feel as though they need to be protected or acknowledged or loved upon or cared for.
I often get challenged because I don't put in the line of work I'm in, I don't put my pronouns after my name, like on the screen right here or on my Zoom profile. And part of the reason why is that it ostracizes the very people I'm trying to connect to. And so when people don't understand why I would put of course I use feminine pronouns, like, and they wouldn't understand that. I'm trying to bring them into the conversation versus what it's doing is normalizing pronouns. Everybody has one for the few people that people can't guess their pronouns. Right. But so I get pushback from my woker friends of like, I can't believe you don't do this. And I was like, you don't know who I talk to more often than not. And if I do that, I feel like I can't have a conversation with most of my audiences. I'm very aware of what it does, and I make that choice strategically.
Let me repeat that. you don't put your pronouns on your Zoom signature or whatever that thing's called because you're afraid you will be seen as a liberal, difficult person by some of the people you're trying to reach.
Right. Because I know who my audiences are.
Yeah.
Right. So I know the clients that I work with, and hiring me was already a stretch.
Right. Because you're the scary woman who's going to talk about DEI.
Right. Now, the training that I'm getting ready to log into as soon as we're done talking, I absolutely will put my pronouns on my name because I'd be the only person who doesn't have them.
All right. So it's this past holiday season, and I'm having dinner with my wife and I and my two daughters, and we're talking about this very topic: pronouns and signature files and Zoom. And I said, "Oh, I confess I'm a little chicken to put my pronouns on for fear I would alienate a potential client who would not hire me because they would think somehow I don't agree with them and I would lose a job."
Yep.
And man, my kids took me to task for that.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, have a spine, dude. It's not, those pronouns are not for you or your client. They're for the some percentage of the world that might feel like, oh, Brad Montgomery's not going to hassle me if I have different pronouns.
Right. We had a conversation last night where my husband's niece, they were raised together as siblings almost because they're almost the same age. Don't ask, Irish family. And their youngest daughter, the niece's youngest daughter, identifies as non-binary and has a lot of like non-binary or trans related buttons on their jacket and their backpack. And they were saying that they don't feel particularly safe right now because of all the legislation and everything up in the news. So in talking to her mother, my husband's niece, she's like, well, I should just double down and put way more pins on my jacket to make it better for my child to feel safe. And at the exact same time, Lauren and I both were like, or take the buttons off. And they were like, oh, take the buttons off. Why would I do that? Visibility. And it's like, we're talking about safety, not a political agenda. If you actually feel unsafe, then I don't think you should have to double down on the behavior that is also making you feel unsafe to teach somebody a lesson. If you are feeling like frustrated by the politics, double down all the way. But that there's a difference there.
Yeah. I mean, if it were my kid, I'd be like, I love you. Take the buttons off so you don't get beat up. You're still you.
Right. Doubling down on the thing that makes somebody feel endangered, and I'm using that word on purpose, is not always the right thing to do. You're just going to be more endangered. Now, are you uncomfortable or endangered? That's a different story.
Dang, it's complex, isn't it? But that's, again, getting back to trying to narrow the distance between the kind of global thought about these groups of people and politics and talking about individual people talking to each other. Right? I guess we're supposed to be, I would like to be a kind of person who's an ally in support of all people. But if it's your kid and they're wearing a button that might get them bullied or beat up or worse, then yeah, that's a different thing, isn't it? It's all about the people.
It's all about the individuals and the context. See, there's another callback.
It is about the context. But aren't some truths just true without context, with or without context?
Well, I married a philosopher, so all truth is true without context. It's the interpretation and the impact of the truth that changes based on context.
I dare anybody to diagram that sentence. I'll never be able to do it. Impossible.
I can. Truth is always true, and what that means to you is what varies based on context.
Well, let's end there. If there's any doubt in the world, who's smarter, Brad or Jess? I'd say Brad, very, very bright. Jess, wow. And that's the truth. Forget
I
conference.
just have a library card. That's the biggest difference.
Well, you're awesome. If people need to, there's nobody on the planet who doesn't need to hear Jess speak. Go to goodenoughnow.com and you can learn about Jess. My name is Brad Montgomery. BradMontgomery.com.
And I'm a rock star. Brad Montgomery, the rock star. That's what you're supposed to say.
The rock star. Everybody, do it. You know how to do it. Social media, like, subscribe, share, bring your friends, comments. We're always curious. Have a really good day. Any last words, Jess?
Nope, you're amazing, and I can't wait. Send us conversation topics. That would be great. Let's see what people come up.
What are the difficult topics you'd like to hear us talk about? Because, well, one, Jess is fearless, and I'm willing. How's that?
Fearless and willing. That's the name of the podcast right there.
Yeah, I'm open to it, even though sometimes it makes me nervous. Everybody have a great day. Thanks, Jess.